At 3:17 in the morning, the camera in hallway B went dark. Not static, not a glitch, just black. The problem was, 30 seconds later, I heard footsteps coming from hallway B. I was alone in that building. I had checked every door myself. I sat there in the security booth staring at that black rectangle on my monitor, and I remember thinking, maybe it's a technical issue. Maybe a bulb blew out near the lens. Maybe the wire came loose. I gave myself every rational explanation I could think of, because the alternative, the thing my gut was already telling me, was something I wasn't ready to accept yet. Let me back up. My name is Daniel. I'm 31 years old, and at the time this happened I was working overnight security at a mid-sized office complex in the industrial part of the city. Not glamorous work, not dangerous work, supposedly. The building was a cluster of 3 connected structures, 2 older office wings and a newer central hub, all owned by a logistics company that had mostly moved their operations out of state. The building still had a handful of tenant offices on the 2nd floor, but the ground level and the 3rd floor were completely empty. Had been for about 8 months. My job was simple. Patrol the perimeter twice per shift, monitor the cameras, check that the exterior doors were locked, and log anything unusual. Most nights I logged nothing. Most nights I drank bad coffee and listened to podcasts until 6 in the morning when the day staff started arriving. I'd been working there for about 4 months when it happened. It was a Tuesday in late November. I remember the weather because it had been raining since the afternoon. That cold, gray, miserable kind of rain that makes everything feel heavier. The parking lot was completely empty when I arrived at 10 p.m. My supervisor, a guy named Marcus, handed off the key ring and told me it had been a quiet evening. Nothing to note. He left without much more than that, and I settled in. The security booth is a small room just inside the main entrance. 1 desk, 1 rolling chair, a panel of 16 monitors showing camera feeds from around the building, and a logbook. There's a space heater under the desk that hums constantly. There's 1 small window to my left that looks out at the front parking lot. That's it. That's your whole world for 8 hours. The first few hours were normal. I did my 11 p.m. perimeter check, found everything locked, came back in. I made coffee. I watched the rain on the parking lot cameras. Around 1 in the morning I did a brief interior walk, ground floor only, which was the standard procedure, and everything was quiet. Empty offices, flickering fluorescent tubes that I'd asked maintenance to fix 3 times, the faint smell of mildew that always lived somewhere in the east corridor. Normal. I got back to the booth around 1:20. I wrote, interior check complete, nothing unusual in the logbook. And then I just sat there, doing what you do at 1:20 in the morning in an empty building, waiting. It was sometime around 2:45 that I first noticed something felt slightly off, though I couldn't have told you exactly what it was. I've tried to explain this part to people, and most of them don't really get it. But if you've ever worked a night job in a building that's supposed to be empty, you'll understand. There's a rhythm to the silence. The heater hums at a certain frequency. The rain hits the skylights in a consistent pattern. The building breathes in a particular way. And that night, sometime around 2:45, something in that rhythm shifted. I can't be more specific than that. I just felt it, like a sound that wasn't there suddenly was, or a sound that should have been there had stopped. I looked up from my phone and scanned the monitors. Everything looked normal. All 16 feeds were live, all showing empty hallways and empty rooms and rain-blurred exterior views. I sat there for a moment, waiting to feel normal again. I didn't quite, but nothing was obviously wrong, so I told myself to stop being weird about it and went back to my phone. Then 3:17 came. I was actually watching the monitors when it happened, not for any particular reason. I just glanced up. Camera 12, hallway B on the ground floor, went completely black. Not a gradual fade, not static or snow. 1 frame it was showing the hallway, the next frame it was black, like someone had simply put their hand over the lens. I wrote the time in the logbook immediately. 3:17 a.m., camera 12 offline. I reached for the radio to call it into the after-hours maintenance line, which is protocol for any equipment failure. Standard stuff. And then I heard the footsteps. They were coming from the direction of hallway B. I know this building. I know the way sound travels through it. Those footsteps were somewhere in the ground floor east wing, which is exactly where Hallway B runs. They weren't loud. They weren't running. They were just slow, even footsteps on a hard floor, the kind a person makes when they're walking casually, not trying to be quiet. I didn't move for probably 10 full seconds. I just sat there with the radio in my hand listening. The footsteps continued, even, unhurried, coming slightly closer. My first thought, and I want to be honest about how my mind was working, was that someone had gotten inside. A homeless person, maybe looking to get out of the rain. It wouldn't have been the first time at a building like this. There's a loading dock on the east side where the seal on one of the bay doors had been deteriorating for months. I'd flagged it in 2 separate reports. If someone knew about it or stumbled on it by accident, they could have gotten in without triggering any of the door alarms. That explanation should have made me feel better. It didn't, for a reason I couldn't immediately identify. I picked up the radio and tried to reach the emergency line. Got static. This happened occasionally. The radio signal in the booth was unreliable, something to do with the metal construction of the walls. I tried twice more, got nothing. I still had my cell phone, so I wasn't cut off, but the radio not working in that moment felt like one more small thing going wrong, and small things going wrong in a sequence is how nights like this build. I pulled up the camera controls on the monitor panel and tried to manually restart camera 12. The system registered the command, but the feed stayed black. I switched to the cameras adjacent to Hallway B, the lobby entrance to that corridor, and the far end near the loading dock, and looked at them carefully. The lobby camera showed an empty hallway extending toward the darkness where camera 12 should have been providing coverage. I couldn't see anything unusual. The loading dock camera showed the dock area, the deteriorating bay door, and a wet floor where rain was apparently getting in. No visible person. But the footsteps were still going. I sat there and made a decision I still think about. I could call the police, report a possible intruder, wait in the booth. That would have been the smart choice, the correct choice, the choice they probably train people to make. Instead, I picked up the flashlight and the radio, and I got up and went to look. I've asked myself why many times. I think part of it was that I genuinely half convinced myself it was a person in need, someone cold and wet who'd found a way in out of the rain, and calling the police on that felt wrong. Part of it was also, if I'm being honest, something dumber than that, a kind of stubbornness, a refusal to be the guy who sat in his booth and called for help because of footsteps. I stepped out of the booth into the main lobby. The building was dim. The overnight lighting is minimal, about half the overhead switched off, but not completely dark. I could see clearly enough. The lobby was empty. I crossed to the east corridor and stood at the entrance to Hallway B and listened. Silence. The footsteps had stopped. I stood there for a long moment, swept my flashlight down the hallway. Empty corridor, closed office doors on both sides, and at the far end the door that led to the loading dock area. Closed as it should be. No person, no sign of disturbance. Camera 12 was mounted about 2/3 of the way down the hall on the right side, a small dome camera attached to the ceiling. I walked toward it slowly, checking the office doors as I passed. All locked. When I got to the camera, I shone my flashlight up at it, and this is the part one keep coming back to. The camera was intact. It hadn't been broken or covered or physically tampered with in any obvious way. But there was something on the dome cover, a smear like a handprint pressed directly over the lens. It was dark and slightly glistening in the flashlight beam. I didn't know what it was at first. I stood under it trying to figure it out. I'm still not certain what it was. I told myself later it was grease or dirt or something that had fallen from the ceiling. I didn't touch it. I logged it. I walked back down that hallway faster than I walked in, and I kept my flashlight moving the entire way. Back in the booth, I finally got through on the radio and reported the camera malfunction and a possible interior access through the loading dock. A patrol unit came by around 4:30, 2 officers who walked the building with me and found nothing. No person, no clear evidence of entry through the loading dock, nothing missing or disturbed. One of the officers looked up at the camera and said something about moisture buildup on the dome housing, which was plausible, I guess. I agreed with him because it was easier. They filed a report and left. I sat in the booth until 6 a.m. when the day manager arrived. I handed her my incident log, told her about the camera, told her about the possible loading dock issue. She said she'd have maintenance look at it. She said it the way you say things you might not actually do. I finished out my shift. I drove home in the gray morning rain. I went to sleep. I went back the next night, and the night after that. The camera was repaired within a few days. The loading dock seal was never fixed while I was there. I checked it every shift. I don't work there anymore. Moved to a different job about 6 weeks after this happened, for unrelated reasons. Here's the thing I've never fully resolved, the part that still gets into my head when I'm trying to sleep. When I walked down hallway B that night, I checked every office door on both sides of the corridor, tried each handle, all locked, and the door at the far end, the loading dock door, was closed and, when I tested it, locked from my side. The footsteps I heard had been walking toward me. Not away from me, toward the loading dock and out. Toward me, toward the lobby, toward the direction of the security booth. And when I came around the corner and into that hallway, there was nothing there. Whatever had been walking in my direction had simply stopped, or ceased, or was somewhere I couldn't see. I have told myself 100 times that sound reflects strangely in those corridors, that I misidentified the direction, that empty buildings play tricks at 3 in the morning on tired people. I believe most of that most of the time. But not always, not late at night, not in that particular silence that falls right around 3 a.m. when the rain has stopped and the heater hums and everything in the building is very, very still. In that silence I sometimes think about whoever, or whatever, had been walking down that hallway unhurried, calm, moving in my direction without any apparent concern about being heard. And I think about the fact that I walked right toward it. And I think about the fact that when I got there, I couldn't find a single explanation for where it went.